Hey, it's Mr. Crazy Toad. On most websites, I go by Brashbuster, and I wanted to talk about my entry in Make a Good Mega Man Level 3, Arcade Archives. I want to talk about what it is, but before I talk about what it is, I want to discuss what it was going to be. A few of the judges shared the sentiment that the level felt unfinished, and so did the game's lead devs Snow and Pyro on the live stream where they revealed the placements of each level. I mentioned this in the comments of the live stream VOD, but I want to make it clear in a video of its own that the level effectively is unfinished. It's a level that I had high ambitions for, and the final product is a result of me not being able to match that. So I want to begin by talking about my inspiration for the level. One big inspiration was a level from the second contest, Make a Good Mega Man Level 2, and that was Bondman by the Skipper 1995. For those who don't know, Bondman was a boss originally planned for the first Mega Man game, as one of the 8 Robot Masters the player would have to fight, but he was scrapped because they could only make 6 Robot Master stages. There have been a lot of scrapped Robot Masters, but Bondman was one of the first people learned about, so he's had a long legacy of being this Mega Man character who never was. I've always been a fan of little odds and ends of history who get forgotten, so I really like this concept of taking this Robot Master idea with a cult following and making a staged and boss fight for him. Going into MaGMML3, I wanted to do something similar with exploring a forgotten boss who never had a true Mega Man style boss battle, and I thought of making a stage for the Robot Master Arcade Man. Arcade Man was the winner of a contest to design a boss for the game Rockman Xover, where the winner would be a boss in the game. Problem is, Rockman Xover is a pretty bare-bones experience, and the fight against Arcade Man was just a bunch of players in a turn-based combat setting, and not a very aesthetically pleasing one either. So while Arcade Man did technically have a boss fight, he didn't have a real 2D run-gun boss fight, and he had no stage at all. I've always been kind of interested in the idea of Arcade Man having a stage and a true boss fight, but the Bondman level made me even more inspired to give the idea a try for MaGMML 3. I had a lot of ideas for what would be in this stage and how Arcade Man would play as a boss. I was interested with how his official artwork had him holding up some floating coins, so I thought I could implement that into his fight by having him throw coins that flew straight out and then flew back to him, kind of like Green Boomerang, except if you shot the coin, it'd send a little projectile back at you, sort of like it reflected your hit. I actually had at least 2 outlines for this fight, each in a different TXT file I had with notes I was taking mid-development. I was also thinking of having a stage take place inside an arcade cabinet, with the tile set resembling circuit boards and other pieces of arcade hardware. I was thinking either the start or the end of the stage could even have a big window, like you're on the other side of an arcade machine screen, like how they showed in Wreck-It Ralph. Even at this point, I knew I wanted to have all the enemies be references old Capcom games, especially ones released before Mega Man, like the ones they referenced in Xover. I considered calling back to Arcade's one Xover attack by having his boss fight briefly summon certain enemies. The one place I was kind of struggling with, ideas-wise, was stage gimmicks. The only ideas I remember fully thinking through involved coin slots and coins. One idea I wrote down was to have the player juggle a coin by shooting it, so they could get the coin into a coin slot and unlock the next area. I also had sort of the opposite idea, where a coin slot would shoot coins out of it, basically the same thing as the Super Cutters from Mega Man 1. I also considered having unique buttons to press based on the buttons on Arcade Man's body, or having a joystick-shaped switch where you'd have to shoot the side the joystick was leaning towards. But then came the big problem with this stage. I was struggling a lot to actually sprite and program my ideas. I had only a few crude tiles for the stage, and I couldn't figure out how to make a good Arcade Man sprite, and without that I couldn't program him into the game. I probably could have asked someone for help, and honestly I don't remember why I didn't. I don't know if I was worried about something or if I just didn't think to speak up about it. I know I reached out somewhat. That's how I got help with a few of the sprites that did make it. I just don't fully remember. It was 6 years ago. I also remember I didn't manage my time well. I remember I was still in school, and that was at least one thing that kept me from focusing on the stage for a while. And before I knew it, it was close to submission time, and all I had to show was the enemies, as I wasn't happy with the tile set. And because I felt Arcade Man's boss theme was too intense for a stage, and resorting to using a Blaster Master Song last second. And I do mean last second, like, it was like a few weeks maybe before the deadline, and they were just offering songs so that people could have songs for their levels. Like, they were just offering NES songs, and that's why I picked Blaster Master. Further back, I did request, as a free request, to have a song be made for the stage. I gave instructions that were basically like, take Arcade Man's boss theme from Xover and like slow it down a little bit, like a Mega Man stage. And the thing that happened was the person who was offering to compose, they got caught up in some other things, and I don't blame them for that. I hold nothing against, because I imagine there probably was a lot going on at the time. So yeah, I didn't keep my ambition in check, and I felt I had to hurry something out instead of dropping out of the contest. This is where the final version of the stage started to form, so I'm going to pivot towards that. First off, I want to get back to the enemy lineup, and I want to explain each of them. Pretty much everyone picked up on Arema R being a reference to the Red Aremers from 1985's Ghosts and Goblins. I figured a Red Aremer-esque enemy was a perfect representation of Ghosts and Goblins. I gave them much simpler attack patterns, so it wasn't as much of a nightmare to fight as a real Red Aremer. Second off, there were the Discals. Apologies to Judge Flashman85, he was hoping their names were shield counterattackers. They're not. It would be a good name though if they weren't a reference to something else. This is the only reference none of the judges got, or if they did get, they didn't say in the judge comms. These guys are based on the spinning skull disc enemies from the 1984 game Sun. Part of the idea behind them was to have them be an antipiece for Arcade Man's coins, because if you shoot them in the front, they shoot back. I want to give a shout out to Melonade M for making these sprites. My original sprites look pretty bad, so I'm glad that Melonade M was able to give them a facelift. I also want to thank Melonade M for helping up with Arema R's head shape. I don't have the original head shape sprite, but that was also really weird looking. The last normal enemy in the stage was the only one that Arcade Man himself didn't reference in Xover, but it's a familiar face to many Capcom fans. Pinwheel is based on the Yashichi, specifically his original incarnation in 1984's Bulgus, as an enemy. Their movement is almost the same as it is in Bulgus, without they fly in one direction until they stop and then fly to plate. I made sure to give them a design animation that didn't confuse players too badly, since the Yashichis are also item pickups in MaGMML3. So on top of making them spin like in Vulgus, I gave them a little mechanical eye, inspired by some of the more mechanical looking Mega Man enemies like Propeller Eye and the Chone. Last, there's the mini-boss, P38SA, which is modeled after the player characters playing from the game 1942. I was going to program a little extra parts of this mini-boss where it would have little lackeys as the mini-planes that you can get as an upgrade in 1942, but this was the one thing that I couldn't figure out how to code amongst the enemies. Without any new gimmicks at my disposal, I ended up focusing mostly on the switch blocks from Mega Man Powered Up and the moving girder platforms from Conroe Man stage and Rockman Forte Challenge Room in the future. I think my choice of switch blocks had to do with their color scheme, since Arcade Man also had a red-blue color scheme. Another big factor was probably that I already had experience with them from designing Burning Bunker from Make a Good 48-hour Mega Man level. With the Conroe Man platforms, I think I just thought they'd make a decent gimmick that hadn't been used much yet. With the boss fight, I figured with the vague red-blue theming my stage had, I could try using Gravity Man. He isn't exactly a favorite boss of mine, but I thought maybe adding switch blocks to his room would spice things up as a way to incorporate a gimmick into the stage's boss. I thought the switch blocks could throw off people's muscle memory with fighting Gravity Man, who is usually fought on flat terrain, and there could be maybe a possible obstacle if a straight projectile hit the switches at the side of the room and mess with the geometry, and the player would have to adjust to that. It didn't really work out. People say the fight's easier this way, so yeah. I picked Mega Man 9 Endless Mode tiles because I thought they gave off a loose circuitry vibe, something like what I was looking for in the first place with the inside an arcade cabinet concept, without using something like Sheetman or Elect Man tiles. As a final note, people are wondering what my idea was behind the second Trickster token, because it's just right there out in the open. I think I just felt obliged to have 3 tokens at a level, since those kinds of collectibles usually come in 3s, like with the star coins in Mario. I just didn't have a puzzle to come up with for the second Trickster token. If I had known how many levels would have more or less than 3 tokens, especially with how many levels had like 2 tokens, I probably would have just removed that second token and kept the first and third. So yeah, that's Arcade Archives, an ambitious idea that I had to replace with something half-baked because I didn't have the know-how. If nothing else, I'm at least glad I got to make the enemy ideas, and now I know to be mindful of my skills if another MaGMML contest comes along and I decide to enter. And that's about all I have to say for this video. I don't know how I'll send this, so bye.